Iba Olokun femi lore. Iba Olokun omore wase fun oyi o. Olokun nuni osi oki eluweye tore. Bi omi ta afi. Bi emi ta afi. Olokun nikale mojuba ashe. Welcome again. As you may have figured and guessed, well, of course, by the title of the podcast file that you're either streaming or downloading, that this podcast session, we're going to be covering the force of Olokun. Olokun. Olokun is the force and power of the unconscious mind, the sleeping giant, if you will. Now, I know oftentimes when we are taught about Olokun, we're taught that Olokun is the patron of the sea or the oceans, and this is also true. In reality, Olokun is the patron of every body of water, every single body of water. But I know usually diaspora, we're taught that Olokun is the owner of the ocean depths, and Yemaya or Yemoja is the patron of the upper layers of the water, of salt water, of course, and fresh water would be Oshun. This is not completely accurate with or in alignment with traditional Yoruba thought and theology, so we're going to kind of cover it. But of course, you know, the name of this podcast is, Indigenous Sciences Applied Today. So it's not necessarily about reaching back and recreating what was if it's not applicable to what is today. So things have changed a bit. So, of course, I always promote that studying these Orisha or these forces should occur from internal to external. So if you want to learn about the external aspects of Olokun, you can Google that all day long, and you can learn what offerings to bring and, all about salt water and seas and oceans. But I prefer we'll cover some of that, but also more importantly, how it relates to your inner verse, your internal universe that you are controlling and at the helm of. Olokun, like I said, governs the concept of space, and Olokun is a part of the trinity of powers, who we would know as Olokun, Olorun, and Onile. But specifically, Olokun governs space. Keep that in mind as we move forward. The concept of space, or of the void, or of infinity. Okay, Olokun is the energy of all bodies of water. Although usually, like I said, he or she is connected with the depths of the sea, while Yemoja is connected with salt water in general, or the surface of the sea. For those of us in the diaspora, Olokun is rarely mentioned, and when this force is mentioned, it's often misrepresented. Some will say that Olokun is the husband of Yemoja. Some say Olokun is androgynous. Some say Olokun is a temperamental, violent force chained to the bottom of the ocean and can only be controlled by Obatala. In all of these patakis that have been altered for the changing times, we find what I consider to be some very interesting truths about this amazing force. In the construct of the yin and yang energies, or yin and yang, we find that yin represents space, while yang represents time. Space is a feminine or magnetic concept representing the infinite depths of transforming knowledge. This is Olokun. Olokun is the infinite depths of the things that we don't know, and as we'll go into further, the things that we're possibly not dealing with that will bring us transformation. As I teach the students at Sadulu House, Those things that lie in the dark transform us. The things that lie in the light enlighten us. Either way, there is a not knowing. There's an unknowing with either polarity. And excuse me if I'm speaking very quickly on this particular session, but it's because Olokun is such a vast concept that I'm gonna have to squeeze a lot of information in. But on another note, I will be actually bringing forth a book soon on Olokun, as well as the other Orisha energies that will be for sale on the site orishareligion.com. So, you know, we can get much deeper into the Olokun. But like I say, if you need to stop and rewind and take notes, you know, definitely do that, because we're going to cover a lot. Now, in dealing with the Olokun energy, we definitely have to address Neptune or Neptunus, which is an Italian agricultural sea archetype, and of course Poseidon. Poseidon is a Greek sea archetype. We see a consistent theme of brutality, and in the case of Poseidon, I would say a modus operandi of rape. Although Neptune or Neptunus was originally an agricultural deity and more closely associated with freshwater, this force is rarely mentioned outside of the company of Poseidon. So it's important that you study both of them, and of course all three of them. The name Olokun, I don't think I've gotten into that. Olo means owner, and kun or okun means ocean. And I had mentioned earlier that Olokun is a part of a triune of Olorun, which means owner of the heavens, the sky, Olokun, owner of the oceans or the seas, and Onile, owner of the earth. Okay, so that's that particular trinity that we're working with on the third dimensional plane. And of course, we know that Earth has its own connotations and esoteric meanings, as well as does the heavens or sky, and as well as does the seas. Now, in the Greek pantheon, we have Poseidon, who is the brother of Zeus and Hades. I would suggest you watch Clash of the Titans. You can watch the one from the 80s or the more recent one that came out. Either one, it does cover that Poseidon energy, which again, you're dealing with Olokun. All right. Now, in the Greek mythology, Poseidon, Zeus, and Hades are the sons of Kronos and Rhea. Kronos was our original, well, not our, but an original archetype of the supreme deity, which some would call God. And we see that there was a transitioning. Okay, so now we know Zeus is the Lord of Heaven, Hades is the Lord of the underworld, and Poseidon is the Lord of the seas. Poseidon receives horses and bulls as sacrifices and is known to be directly related or associated with the horse, because it was Poseidon who was chronicled to have created the horse when he struck his triune, which is the that pitchfork. You know, we always see Poseidon and oftentimes images of Olokun as well, with this pitchfork, which of course we see in the earlier and even some of the current representations of Satan or the devil. Well, the pitchfork actually is the pitchfork used in agriculture. The Trident has, which is what it's called, the Trident, has always been a symbol of the ocean and of the oceanic archetypes. And it actually originally was not only an agricultural tool, but it was a fishing tool. It was considered to be able to, you would use that and you could capture more fish, or your chance of spearing a fish would be more greatly improved. So for those of you who are building Olokun shrines, this is a symbol that you can use, because the trident not only served as a weapon, but it also served as a tool for bringing food, and it also is symbolic of the male phallus. The trident was created by the Cyclops, and they created this weapon after Zeus freed them from Tartarus. And there were 3 gifts given. Zeus was given the thunderbolts, Hades was given a helmet of invisibility, and Hades itself means invisibility, and Poseidon was given the trident. Keep in mind that Poseidon's name at one point meant husband of the earth, and it also means the earth shaker. So this is a reference to these oceanic archetypes' ability to affect life on Earth, or to destroy, life on Earth. They are life bringers, but they also are life takers through hurricanes and storms and tsunamis, but they also ensure the fertility of the Earth through their waters. As you study deeper the energy of these oceanic deities, like Yemoja, Olokun, Poseidon, Neptune, you'll find that there's a constant theme of destruction and brutality. Again, representing the unconscious, subconscious, which we're gonna boomerang back into. But you'll find that there's always this incredible emotional, deep emotional destructive power. Typically in the diaspora, when we are introduced to the energy of Yemoja, we're taught about this nurturing, loving, acquiescing mother, but traditionally that is not so much the image of Yemoja, because women in Yoruba society hold a very equal role to the men, and it's very clear as to their power of destruction, as well as their power of creation, but their ability to completely bring a society to its knees. And Yemoja has always been known to do that if her children are offended or harmed or in danger. However, dealing with Poseidon, however difficult and tumultuous Poseidon's legends and myths have been, this is a force that reminds us to stay connected to the deep emotional and instinctual parts of ourselves. And these are usually the most uncomfortable and thorny aspects of our character, the things that make us feel most afraid of what lies in the darkness of ourselves. I'm going to get back into the symbols of Poseidon for a moment, and then we're going to go back over to Olokun. But again, remember, you're dealing with an emanation or an expression of the same energy. So whether we're talking about Poseidon, Neptune, Mami Water, Yemoja, it's important to learn the interrelation between all of them. Now we know, of course, Poseidon has the 3-pronged spear, which we call the trident, but another symbol is the horse, the white pine tree, earthquakes, bulls, oceans, springs, which we would call underground water, dolphins, any form of sea monster you need to study, as well as tidal waves. Now with the trident, which is a key symbol, it has a threefold meaning. One would be birth, life, and death. The other, mind, body, and spirit, as well as past, present, future. When you study the aspects of Olokun in the sea, you'll see that it's such an all-encompassing environment that you will find birth, life, and death. It is the world's largest cemetery, and not just because of the transatlantic African Holocaust, but because all things eventually end up in the sea or underground and reabsorbed into the water, even the riches. That's why all of the riches are said to be brought to Olokun's feet. All of the gold and underwater minerals that are even in fresh water eventually end up back in the sea. But you also have the aspects of past, present, future, which again is very clear studying the Ma'afa, mind, body, spirit. It is said that this is where the ancestors go to gestate prior to their transition either here coming back to the third dimension or moving to the next level. We know that water is the perfect incubator and host for spirits. That's why water is used so often in rituals. So great bodies of water, subsequently we can assume, or we can deduct, that great bodies of water will hold great numbers of spirits. Now, dealing with just the aspect of water and the various layers of the ocean, I think it's important to understand how in the diaspora we develop this idea of Yemoja being the top layer and Olokun being the lower. Also, another thing to keep in mind, that Olokun's name, some also say, was originally Olokunmi, and we know that Lukunmi or Lukumi means my friend. So Olokunmi would be the owner of my friend. But getting back to the particular layers, Yemoja is over the top layer of the ocean, as we've learned in the diaspora, or as it's said. This is called the euphotic layer, and this is the top layer of water where photosynthesis is able to occur, because light is able to penetrate that particular layer, and it allows the growth of plants and again the process of photosynthesis. Whereas Olokun is considered to be the bottom 2/3, or what they call the bathopelagic, right? The bathopelagic layer of the ocean, or the mesopelagic layer of the ocean. And in this particular layer, the only plants that are able to grow, they're only able to grow through the process of chemosynthesis. So you have photosynthesis and you have chemosynthesis. And on this bottom 2/3 of layer, 2/3 of water, there's no light that can penetrate, and obviously we have great amounts of pressure. So the plants and the animals that grow at that layer, they are completely sculpted and crafted by the high levels of pressure and the lack of light. So in mythology and in ancient times, things that were thought to be down there were considered to be monstrous. Okay, it's important to remember. We're going to address that and get into, again, the internal subconscious aspects, or the hidden self, the shadow self that Olokun represents. At those lower layers of the ocean, there is perpetual darkness, and photosynthesis does not happen. Also, keep something in mind. I want to boomerang back. Like I said, we're stuffing a lot into a small time on this particular session. But the Cyclops gave Poseidon the Trident, as well as Zeus the helmet, and Zeus the thunderbolt, Hades the helmet. The Cyclops represents the pineal gland, or the first eye. Okay, so keep that in mind. So anytime you see in mythology a Cyclops, you're talking about the pineal gland. So even when we're dealing with Olokun, or the Poseidon energy, and we're told that there's perpetual darkness, well, yes and no. With the physical eye, yes, but the Cyclops, or that pineal gland, is active still. So this is a realm that you would go and you would navigate through the use of your pineal. Okay, now at those lower levels, the temperature is around 34 to 37 degrees, and we mainly find predators and scavengers because of the extreme depth pressure, and whatever falls from above will be down at that lower level. So this is one of the reasons why Olokun is said to rule the land of the dead, or the lower levels of the ocean is the land of the dead. We find plants and animals, again, which are considered to be distorted, and this is where we get the understanding or the origins of the mythical monsters like the Leviathan and the Hydra, which we're going to get into, and the Kraken. The sea also represents, or is represented by, you have mountains in the sea, you have plateaus, ridges, canyons, all kind of crevices, which up until fairly recently wasn't even explored. There was no idea that there was this whole topography that existed within the ocean. Obviously, we have oceanographic research, and that allowed for graphical layouts of the type of terrain that's beneath the sea to be exposed, but the majority of the depths of the sea still remain a mystery. Again, relate that to the subconscious mind, or the subconscious unconscious. There is still so much to your character and to your thought and mind that will probably never be explored, just like the sea. In reality, it wasn't really until 1981 where scientists realized that things that are under the sea, because they had actually excavated a ship. It was the name of the ship was the Mary Rose. It was a 16th century flagship, and they found that on this ship that certain artifacts were completely preserved in the depths of the ocean, completely intact. Now, those of us understanding the occult or esoteric meaning, we realize that Olokun is often called the keeper of secrets, because again, at those depths you have secrets that in the depths of your mind is where your deepest, darkest secrets lie. But Olokun is the preserver of knowledge of the past, and those sea monsters that you often see or you hear about, those are the things that go completely unchanged and stay intact. Now, let's relate this to your subconscious mind. I taught my students in the Sadulu house an exercise one day, and this exercise was dealing with the chakras, but utilizing your pineal gland to understand which house or which chakra wheel that your soul was currently residing in, by closing your eyes, staring up at your first eye, taking several deep breaths, and then remembering what color you saw at that moment. That color would tell you what house that you're currently residing in. And we went through the exercise, and one of the things that I shared with the students, the Umfundi, was that when I used to do this exercise, when I first began, I used to see all kind of images. I didn't really see colors. I saw faces. I saw what one would consider monsters. And in seeing this, I had to kind of deal with these images first before I could even start dealing with my own chakras. Well, what was happening was that when I was taking these deep breaths and going into my pineal, it was like the Cyclops giving me the gift of the Trident and being able to see past, present, and future, or birth, life, and death. And I was going deep into the recesses of my subconscious mind, or the recesses of my unconscious mind, and seeing the issues that still resided there that needed to be dealt with, which were more based off of fear. I was coming face to face with my fears that I needed to address before I could move on to ascending through any chakra ladder. So when we see any stories or we see movies and mythology that deal with these sea monsters, the sea monster represents, sometimes, we're going to get into the other representation, the things that are deep down within you that you have not dealt with yet. Olokun, again, is the unconscious mind. When we see stories or we hear stories, mythology about places like Atlantis and Lemuria, Atlantis and Lemuria symbolically represent the conscious mind, or the fully awakened deity. And of course, we always hear about these places sinking into the ocean. Well, that represents a people sinking into unconsciousness. And Olokun being the owner of those secrets, or the keeper, more specifically, of those secrets, that means that nothing is ever lost. So whatever wisdom and technology and philosophies and calculations that were developed in the lands of Atlantis and Lemuria, it's still kept and still preserved. How do you get through it? You have to go to the recesses of your subconscious mind, and sometimes you're going to have to fight through a couple of monsters to get there. Olokun holds the secrets to the past, present, and the future. So now, of course, one may ask, does this have anything to do with divination? Of course. Olokun also rules over divination. And that's why sometimes you'll divine or you'll do readings and there'll be cloudy areas. There'll be some things that are still in the darkness. You work with Olokun to clear these things up or to excavate them. It is the possible monstrous fate hidden amongst the darkness that serves as kind of a system of checks and balances for us. It allows us never to get too arrogant, when we realize that we always still have these things deep within us to deal with. There's an Orisha that Olokun is associated with that's important for you to know, and that's Oro Ina. And Ina we know means fire. Oro Ina is the fire that lives at the core of the earth. And in certain Iles, especially in Cuba, you have Olokonosa, which means Olokun's lagoon. And this is a female Orisha that is supposed to be connected with the male Olokun. So these are good ones for you to look up and to learn. Olokun is also associated with the mudfish. Now, interesting enough, you'll find the mudfish also in Grecian and Sumeria artwork as associated with sea monsters. Now, the mudfish, if you're not familiar, is a fish that burrows deep into the mud during the dry season. It's amphibious and it lives in water, but it hops over the dry land. And you have even certain mudfish that climb trees, and they build nests inside of trees. Now these are fish now. The mudfish is symbolic of Olokun's ability to rule water and land, but also from an esoteric standpoint is also symbolic of our ascent from the bottom of the sea onto dry land and into trees, which just deals with the ascent of your consciousness from unconscious, from the deepest, darkest places to fully realizing what you are, going through the different levels. In Benin, the mudfish is represented as legs of the king, and the king is said to be representative of Olokun on dry land. Other representations of Olokun would be red coral, which is very interesting. Because red coral is actually a community of tiny animals which join together by the skeletons of their dead ancestors. And as the coral grows, or what we call reefs, well, actually the reefs are formed by this coral growing, the actual coral reefs, they purify the water that they sit in. And of course, they also provide shelter for the other animals, and they encourage the growth of wildlife communities beneath the sea. So this red coral, which symbolizes Olokun, is actually a network of ancestors, because they're actual skeletons, and communities grow around them. Olokun represents civilization beneath the sea, but also ascendancy on land, which is very important for you to understand. Oftentimes you'll see pictures of Olokun, Poseidon, again Neptune, wearing a gown and a crown of coral, and sometimes even having the legs of a mudfish. You'll sometimes see Olokun holding a crocodile in each hand, and or sometimes depicted as a merhuman, or merman, merwoman. Okay, so these are all different symbologies that you want to keep an eye out for when you're working with Olokun. But not only keep an eye out for, but you can use these to put on your shrines and jingilis in order to provide an opening or pathway for Olokun to come in and work with you. You use Olokun, this force, when you want to conceive children. In Yoruba land, barren women, they will approach Olokun for children, but you especially work with Olokun for money, especially work with Olokun for political and social ascendancy, because you remember Olokun is royalty. So when you're looking to climb the ladders of any political structure, any social structure, you work with Olokun. Olokun also deals with instant healing. It's salt water. And Olokun can heal you within seconds. So Olokun is a very fierce and quick Orisha. The patakis dealing with Olokun often deal with Olokun's violent temper. But you'll find that the violent temper is always enacted when one of his children or her children are wronged. And the result is always the same. Olokun floods the lands and has the ability to completely subdue the land. So what does this represent? This represents how our emotions can bring us into a total state of unconsciousness, completely take us off the road of higher awareness. And when we are lost in the wavy and pools of our watery emotions, we can completely fall into a place of unconsciousness and only hope to be like the mudfish or these places like Lemuria or Atlantis and rise back up again into consciousness. Another Orisha completely associated greatly with Olokun is Oya. And Oya is the winds and the hurricanes that form over the ocean bodies. Also our Egun are closely related with Olokun, and so you need to understand the concept of Iku, or death, or the science of death. That's very important. IA and the transition of human beings and spirits between these two existences is important. Now I'm just going to run down for you some of the we'll say that the human thought characteristics of Olokun that you can tap into and even just put on your shrine if you even just want to write them down however you want, or create mantras or sigils in order to invoke these particular characteristics of Olokun. Olokun deals with patience, endurance, sternness, observation, meditation, valuing one's historical past and legacy, future visions and cognition, again royalty, and the characteristics of anything that would be found at the depths of the ocean, like mystery, secrets, unknown knowledge, things that transform you. Olokun is unimaginable wisdom and governs that instinct that we have in us where we know that life is something worth exploring, that there is something worth knowing about our existence, that there is something more that one can learn, especially when you're dealing with spiritual sciences. Olokun governs material wealth, psychic abilities, dreaming, mental health, water-based healing, and a whole host of other things that deal with, again, salt water. So study that concept of salt water, but any water spirit, especially Mami Water, because in traditional culture, Mami Water and Olokun are actually usually acknowledged together. Now I just want to get into a pataki that I find to be very interesting dealing with Olokun. There was a hunter that resided in Ohonigbe in the Edo kingdom of Benin. One day he ventured off into the woods on a hunting expedition. While chasing a bush pig, he was attracted to the river Ethiop, where he was captured and taken to the bottom of the river by a band of spirits. It was here that he was introduced to the deity Olokun. He stayed in this underwater abode for 3 years, and in the course of those 3 years, he was encouraged to participate in spiritual rituals. By doing so, he learned the spiritual sciences and worship practices associated with Olokun. Back in his hometown, his family and neighbors assumed that he was dead after being gone for such a long time. They were surprised, to say the least, when he returned on the day his 3-year tour ended. He was unable to speak, though. He was carrying a pot of water on his head. His only response to their questions was to dance hysterically, much to the shock of his townsfolk. Eventually, the crowd that had gathered began to make fun of him and more so mock his dance, and it started that this was to become a 14-day tribute of ritual dancing to Olokun. At the end of this period, the hunter began to talk again and chose to share some of his experiences. All skepticism about his story were erased as he began to do spiritual work that created positive results for those around him. He was named chief priest of Olokun. Even unto this day, hunters reenact this famous tribesman's life with the annual festival and Akaba dance. Erinhog Igbe, Olokun's temple, sits on the spot where he is said to have rested his Olokun's pot on the 14th day. Now, I'll tell you this story because, again, often in various mythology, especially in Celtic mythology, you'll see stories of hunters and people being drugged into the sea and then coming back mute. This is not an exclusive concept to Yoruba land. Where it originates, I couldn't really tell you, but again, I tell you this pataki so that when you see these stories or see them in movies or in songs, pay attention. There's something to learn when you study things from various angles. Also, it's important for you to know that Olokun is actually the patron spirit of the Ethiopia River. Interesting name, Ethiop. But, you know, we don't have so much time, so I'll get into that further in the book. But that is actually very significant. And of course, you hear Ethiopia in that name. In Benin, you'll find also that the word Orisha is not really used, but more so Ebo is used, and that's what they call the Orisha. But in bringing this hunter down to its world, you find that Olokun represents that impenetrable abyss, that infinite solitude where there is no light, but there is a certain type of transformation that occurs without light, but within dark. But in that infinite solitude or that impenetrable abyss is where we learn many secrets. Dealing with the brutality of these oceanic archetypes, you'll find that there was one story where Olokun, resenting a humanity which did not properly acknowledge it, Olokun decided to, or when I say it, Olokun did not acknowledge Olokun. Olokun decided to punish it by burying it in the ocean. And the only way that this was prevented, although he did begin to do this, and the oceans kind of swelled up and got real dark, and the coast was being covered, and everybody was running to the mountains, which of course we know is symbolized by Obatala. They asked Obatala to intercede, and just as the waters had gotten to them, Obatala put himself between Olokun and the people, and Olokun came through on a gigantic wave, carrying his silver fan, which we call the Abeb, and Obatala left his Opat, which is his scepter, and Olokun had respect for Obatala. And that's one pataki. There was another one where Obatala had to be chained to the bottom of the ocean, and that was the only thing, and he's still chained to the bottom of the ocean, and that was the only thing to keep Olokun from continuing to destroy the landmass. And this was done because one of not necessarily his children, but a young girl who he greatly loved was offended, so he decided to destroy the land masses when he was angry. Again, we see the concept of the chain, which we know represents not only Kundalini energy, but the DNA ladder, which also represents evolution. But it is said that Obatala is chained to the bottom of the ocean, and this is the only thing that keeps us from being completely drowned and swallowed up in water, or shall we say completely drowned and swallowed up in unconsciousness. I would say that this also serves as a warning to always rule over your demons and spirits. Always make sure that if, you know, whatever ancestors that are residing in your blood, that you be clear that your Ori, or your soul, has to be the head pilot of the ship. and nothing else. Those things need to remain chained to it proverbially, while you stay in control. You know, you'll often find stories of Olokun being sad, angry, or gloomy, and this is more so our representation or our signification of what the sea represents, because for those of us in the diaspora as well as continental Africans, the sea represents separation from Africa. Okay, so the sea, in some people's minds, separates us from our mother or separates us from our root. But as you'll find, I have a music project I'm working on as well, and there's a song in particular where I speak about nothing is ever lost. We really are not separated from Africa, because what happens, and you'll find this in the movie Ray. The movie Ray with Jamie Foxx gets really nicely into this Olokun aspect of the deep recesses of the subconscious mind. You'll find that when Ray went through his deepest and darkest period, who did he see? His mother and his brother. And, you know, I'm going to paraphrase. I only saw the movie once, so I may, you know, misquote some things. But I know there was a part where he said, you know, I won all these awards, I sung all these songs. I wish you could have seen it. And he was talking to his mother, and his mother said, Ray, we were there. What are you talking about? And that was a very profound, to me, aspect of that movie that they brought out, was that the ancestors never leave you. They reside within your blood. They're connected to that DNA chain that is inside of you. So anything you do, they do. There's no separation whatsoever. And Ray was only able to determine this when he went to his deepest, darkest point, which again, he went into Olokun's realm, and he was able to learn this deep mystery. Okay, so associate that again with the other stories you hear about hunters being dragged down and so forth and so on, and learning mysteries. They're learning the mysteries of their ancestors. Now, of course, as usual, I'm over time. But not that really matters, because the time is only something that I've signified, and, you know, whatever. But I want to get into two other energies really quick in closing, and I'll cover these more in the Olokun book that I'm working on. And one that you need to study is Leviathan. The Leviathan is an energy, or a creature, let's say, that was originally used as the image of Satan. Now, I can tell you right now, make a long story short, the Leviathan represents feminine energy. Okay, now, the Leviathan was said to endanger both God's creatures by attempting to eat them, and God's creations by threatening it with the upheaval of waters and sending these waters to the earth and creating total chaos. Okay, now these were the ideas that were developed in the Middle Ages, the European Middle Ages. St. Thomas Aquinas, you know his name, St. Thomas Aquinas, you can look that up, described the Leviathan as the demon of envy. The demon of envy. And it was said that this particular demon punished sinners who had the spirit of envy in them. Leviathan became associated with the visual motif of the hell mouth, and we'll get into the hell mouth, which is a very important concept. But the Leviathan was said to be a monstrous animal whose mouth represented the last judgment. And you would find the Leviathan in a lot of Anglo-Saxon art from around 800 AD, and you know, all over Europe you'll find this. But what's important is that the Leviathan deity contained a duality in which it was a constant source of fertility, and from its entrails the earth was germinated. But yet at the same time, the Leviathan represented an expression of the world of the dead. Well, this is a womb. The hell mouth is nothing but the female womb, which we know in European culture around that time, there was nothing more wicked than the black hole of a woman's womb. But as with the earth, many things come up from the sea and end in the sea. So the sea, or the Leviathan, or Olokun, would always represent life and death at the same time. Now you have in demonology, you can look like in the Satanic Bible, you have the Leviathan, or what they call, and then the word Leviathan means twisted coil. So now we're talking about twisted coils, we're talking about Kundalini. But the Leviathan is mentioned as well in King James Bible, we'll use that term. But in demonology, the Leviathan is one of the 7 princes of hell, or the gatekeeper of the hell mouth. The word has always, in ancient time, the word has become synonymous with any great or large sea monster. You'll even see it in Moby Dick, the Leviathan mentioned. It also refers to any big giant whale. Okay, and it is said that when a Leviathan is hungry, it sends forth from its mouth a heat so great as to make all the waters of the deep boil. So the heat from its mouth is so hot, it makes the waters boil. Now, we're talking about, again, the heat of Kundalini. That's that Shakti meeting with Shiva energy. It's so, a lot of these things coincide, but understand and know that we're talking about feminine energy. Another energy you need to learn about is the Hydra. Now, this is, we find that the Hydra in Greek mythology. The Hydra was a ancient serpent water beast with kind of like reptilian traits. Again, we're dealing with reptiles, Kundalini. It possessed more heads than could be counted, and every time you would cut one head off, 2 heads would grow. Okay, so Hydra is, when we're dealing with Hydra, we're dealing with hydrogen. Hydrogen is considered to be the first element in the universe, and to many considered to be the most simplest element, because it only took 1 proton and 1 electron to make the hydrogen atom. Now there are some that purport that hydrogen is actually God, and that after the Big Bang, if you're one that follows the Big Bang theory, that there were only two elements created. One was hydrogen, and the other one being helium. Helium, we have helios, which means the sun. But again, I'll get into this more in the book, but I want, for those who want to get deeper into the Olokun energy, scientifically, metaphysically, and internally, study the Leviathan and any water snake deity, the Hydra, and the element of hydrogen. These are all related to Olokun. And remember, Olokun, in closing, is the depth of your subconscious mind. It is the secret, but not only the secrets, the powers that lie deep in your subconscious mind. It's your ancestral connection and the knowledge and the wisdom that is sustained and maintained throughout generations. There's an Odu in particular that deals with Olokun that a lot of people read, but they associate it with Oshun, which it is as well, but that's the Odu of Irosun. Okay, now in Irosun, or Irosu as some call it, the Su, because it's Irosun, or Irosu, Irosu. Eshu means sleep. Keep that in mind. Eshu means sleep. So again, we're dealing with information that can also be received during the sleep state, or again when we're going deep into the subconscious mind. So, those who may have even Irosun or Iroso that comes up, it may come up, frequently in divination, or it may even be a part of their Ita, may find that they like to sleep a lot. Well, this is a time when you need to be, when your sleeping needs to be a power tool. Olokun again deals with those deep recesses in that particular Odu, because Irosun deals with the movement of energy. Keep that in mind. Vast amounts of energy that are moved, and it is said that Olokun rules Irosun. In some traditions, and in other traditions, it says that Olokun was born through Irosun, through that particular Odu. But also with that Odu, you'll find associated not only Oshun and Eshu, but you'll find the Iyami Osuronga, or the mothers, the earth mothers. So with that Olokun energy, the greatest way to tap into it, sure, you can go to the ocean, definitely, you can go to the seas, but the greatest way to tap into the Olokun energy is to go deep into the recesses of your subconscious mind. That is the greatest way you could do that. Tap deep into those ancestral energies, and when you close your eyes and you see those monsters, like I saw, and those sea monsters, I saw the Leviathans, I saw the Hydras, the Krakens, because when I saw images of them later, these were some of the same things that I had saw in my thoughts, as a child. But these were actually energies that were leading me to the ancestral energy, just like the hunter and that pataki was led deep into the recesses of the ocean in order to learn secrets that he could later use when he re-emerged into the world of the living, so we'll say. And there's nothing wrong with dealing with the dead or dealing with the ancestral energy, but what's important, especially with the Odu Irosu or Irosun, it teaches us not to stay there. We have to be balanced in our light and dark explorations, our living and dead explorations, our birth and death explorations. That balance is also symbolized by the Trident of Poseidon, the Trident of Olokun, the Trident of Neptunus. Okay, Olokun is a balancing energy, and it's one of the reasons why Olokun is chained to the bottom of the ocean. But remember, that chain wrapped around Olokun represents your ancestral ladder. So, can you put Olokun next to your ancestral shrines? And yes, you can. Remember, Olokun works very closely with Oya, the patron of the ancestors. Okay, and ultimately, all of these Orisha are thought forms that live inside of you. So you can put Olokun wherever you think to. Okay, so again, I thank you for joining me for this session. I know we went way over, but hopefully and willfully you got some information that you can use about this deity, this archetype, Olokun. And like I said, I have a book forthcoming on Olokun, as well as I'll be working on a book on Ogun, Eshu, Ochosi, Odudua, Owumila, Oshun, Shango, Oya, as well as some of the Palo energies like Matalumba, Siete Rayos, Sintala Ndoki, and Lucero. And those books would be more so guidebooks, as well as quick to the point, how do we make some stuff happen in this day and time, guidebooks that I know that we can all make use of. All right, so again, I'm very thankful and grateful for all the emails that have come forth, and I've had several that's requested the Olokun. So I hope this satisfies and fulfills your research and gives you some things to work with for a time, and you will do further research and expand it. So, because the more you expand, the smarter you get, the smarter I get. That's how this thing works, because ultimately we're all connected. Ultimately, Olokun teaches us that. So my thing is about strengthening the snake coil and raising it, because we're all attached to that snake coil. So we all move together. So I want us all to be strong. I want us all to ascend, so we can be at the head of this transformation and this shift that we all feel is coming. If you didn't feel it was coming, you would not be listening to this podcast. You would not be listening to this session. This is all about your preparation for the coming shift, so that you can change your spiritual and biophysiology in order to be able to withstand it and to cross through the gateway of it, through the hell mouth. So again, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can go to the site orisharieligion.com and get a bit more information. And yes, that is a newer site that I developed. And you can always email me as you always have at the regular places, and pick up a copy of Grasping the Root of Divine Power. Grasping the Root of Divine Power, which is an excellent book. I would say the best book that yes, it is a book that I wrote, but I'll still say it's the best book that really covers not only the Orisha, but the 9-position Obi divination system, which I've never seen a book cover, actually. And through my case studies, it deals with the Orisha in a way that is a lot more practical, where you can use the information immediately, as opposed to getting lost in stories and mythology that oftentimes just ends up being very cryptic. Okay, so until next time, keep the emails coming in, and I will try to deliver the next session in a much quicker and sooner time frame. I know I always say that, but this time I will definitely put some things in place to do that. All right, so be well, stay smart, stay aware. Ashe.